Welcome to the Female Dating Strategy, the meanest female-only podcast on the internet. I'm your host, Diana.
And I'm your host, Rose. And today we have an ongoing continuation of the last week's discussion. Right, Diana?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go into some of the thoughts and tangents that our discussion with Dr. Ashni led us to contemplate in the last week, and helps us really tie together a lot of what FDS has always been an advocate for, which is women winning.
Mm-hmm. Maximizing female benefit.
Maximizing female benefit. It's the name of the game, and we're going to go into it. To lead that discussion, I asked Diana if I could read a quote from my favorite, and she agreed. Once we read this quote, that's sort of like our thesis for this whole discussion today, and then we're going to go into it. So if you would please do me the pleasure and honor of allowing me to do a little bit of a quote, we're going to get going.
Go right ahead.
So we've got this quote from Marilyn Frye from her essays in feminist theory. It's entitled The Politics of Reality. And here she quotes, "To say that straight men are heterosexual is only to say that they engage in sex, as in fucking exclusively with the other sex, i.e. women. All or almost all of that which pertains to love, most straight men reserve exclusively for other men. The people whom they admire, respect, adore, revere, honor, whom they imitate, idolize, and form profound attachments to, whom they are willing to teach, and from whom they are willing to learn, and whose respect, admiration, recognition, honor, reverence, and love they desire, those are overwhelmingly other men. In their relations with women, what passes for respect is kindness, generosity, or paternalism. What passes for honor is removal to the pedestal. From women, they want devotion, service, and sex. Heterosexual male culture is homoerotic. It is man-loving." End quote. And this is something that had actually kicked us off with our discussion with Ashni, was it not? Where we talked about putting the homo in homo sapien, Diana?
Yep.
And we just really thought about, all this time that women are constantly being lambasted for their standards, which is what FDS has always advocated for. I mean, we have, from the jump, this has been our line in the sand, maximizing female benefit. And we have been ruthlessly hammered on this point. I mean, we had to leave Reddit because of the harassment and the brigading. So obviously, we were ruffling a lot of feathers from the males of the species. And we think it really just points to the fact that we have completely upended the natural order amongst our own kind, and in turn led to the desolation of the entire planet. So ladies, in this week's discussion, we are going to discuss how we can use the natural world and the animal kingdom to rediscover what we have already known and been educated to forget. Diana, let's get into it.
I think it's important to acknowledge that men are the ones that have appended the natural order. Women, if anything, have tried to put it back into order. We're trying to restore balance. We're basically the avatar, okay? We're here to put the balance back into the universe. And unfortunately, balance means that they can't just get away with treating everyone they want, whichever way they want. And that's the thing, one of the things I had a discussion with Dr. Ashley about last week after we were wrapped up was she said, you know what they have no room for in the animal kingdom? Ego. She's like, from the moment man discovered himself, the cultivation of self is what has separated us from other animals. The idea that we have our own self-interest, our own purpose, our own destiny, these are all the cultivation of the ego. In the animal kingdom, ego is what gets you killed. If there's a small-ass monkey and he picks a fight with a silverback gorilla, he is going to die if he thinks he's as strong as the silverback gorilla. But men have artificially created systems that have allowed them to retain control of resources, of education, of women's ability to define for themselves what they want out of their lives. And so it's this artificial reality that women have grown up in. And it's almost like we are animals in captivity. We have not been behaving naturally. A lot of what we've been doing is coping and surviving in a system that is designed to oppress us. And so, you behave like a caged bird. It's very important for you to understand the context of which your actions happen, because a lot of these actions happen in a system where you are not free. You have been operating as a caged bird. And so a lot of your fear and your response comes from being a caged bird. So we want women to see themselves as like, this is the episode where you get to stretch your wings a little bit, because we are trying to, bring the woo back into wooing and also talk about the collateral damage of what all of this artificial rigging of the game has resulted in, for women specifically.
Absolutely. And, I was just looking up, I know there are some books that talk about this. There's one specifically by Esther Perel, Mating in Captivity, which I think had such a tantalizing discussion as like the title. But really, it's about how we can desire what we already have. In other words, how can we find some sort of pleasure or contentment in this artificial system, which has been designed to subjugate us and abnegate our pleasure at every turn? This is also kind of a continuation of when Ashin was talking about, there's so much in primatology and in her animal studies that she has not been able to find, or the wrong questions have been asked, or articles are published and then later retracted, or they're published and not retracted, but they're later proven wrong, but they remain common knowledge, aka, these myths that sort of circulate a la the alpha wolf. And all of this is because, again, this is an artificial system. Academia, publishing, it's run by men. And so a lot of the information that could be helpful for us, especially from, the natural order of things, that is absolutely non grata in the publishing world and in the world of knowledge building. And so let's not forget that it is only with the advent of social media, especially with YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and now podcasting, that women have actually been able to have these discussions. I mean, this is such a new phenomena. We really can't even wrap our little brains around it. I mean, do you even remember, Diana, where the first women's vote was secured and when?
It must have been the early 1900s, right? 1920 something.
It was 1918.
1918, yeah.
That was literally 100 years ago, okay? That's 1 century. And in that time, we've already faced an immense backlash. At every turn where we have secured any gain, we have faced an immense backlash because we are pushing back against this unnatural order that they have been able to maintain, for millennia. But let's not forget that men are the ones who actually rigged the system. They created it, they rigged it, and they're still losing. Ladies, this system is not sustainable. Patriarchy hurts us all. I'm not interested in the side of men who are getting hurt. That's something that they're going to have to work out on their own. I wish them luck. I have no ill will towards them. But it is women and children that I really want us to save. And it is women and children who are always most damaged. We are the collateral damage in this unnatural order that has been set up under patriarchy. And so we really want to discuss how putting the woo back into wooing is so integral to us taking back and beginning to reclaim what has been denied us.
Yes. And I think that, part of the reason why we had this discussion last week about understanding the animal kingdom is when we talk about women showing ruthless standards and why we need them. I think a lot of people have a lot of guilt about having ruthless standards because they seem to think that it's unfair to men or it makes them feel exceedingly guilty to have those kinds of standards. That is your patriarchal conditioning. That is not a real thing. If you observe any other animal in its natural habitat, almost exclusively, if the male species does something that the female does not like, she will not mate with it. No questions asked. There aren't a bunch of male spiders going around asking the female spider, why won't you have sex with me? Oh my God, your cobweb is going to dry all up. You're never going to find another spider again. Like, this shit doesn't happen in the animal kingdom, okay? There isn't a lion out there who's being chased by a male lion being like, you're hitting the wall. Like, this is not a thing.
You've passed your expiration date, lioness, as she's sitting there all glorious.
The female is always valuable. And there's many cases where when men, like the male species, like I think in seagulls, when they don't find females to mate with, they end up mating with each other because there's just no other option. This is why a lot of men go gay in prison because they don't have options.
And hey, we were talking about this, Diana. Look at gay men and look at their standards. Are they sitting there saying like, oh, an unwashed ass, that's okay, I'll fuck it anyway? Hell fucking no. They would never. And so, ladies, if homosexual men have these exceedingly high standards for the men with whom they will fuck, why don't we? Especially when we have so many more disadvantages as a result of fucking them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're more likely to get STDs. We're more likely to get pregnant. We're more likely to be abandoned if we get pregnant, And also, people always hide all the crazy shit that happens to you in pregnancy. And I really feel like these women that have been through pregnancy really need to talk about what they go through. Because when I hear about this crazy stuff that happens to you during pregnancy, I'm like, oh my God.
How do we not know this already?
And I mean, there's a clear reason why we don't know it, right? Because if we did, many of us would choose not to get pregnant. And so, like that's why men have to sell you this like snake oil of like motherhood, the most fulfilling career of them all. It's the zenith of human work production or whatever the fuck. And it's like, at the end of the day, if being a mom was all it was cracked up to be, men would be lining up to be moms like ASAP. Like, how many men do you know who are giving up being a six-figure earning CEO to go back home and like cook cookies for, like, make bake cookies for their kids and shit? They aren't doing that because there's no value. They know there's no value in doing that.
They know. It's the same when they're like, no, sex work is work. And by the way, we are always in favor of women workers, no matter what situation you're in. But we do believe that under patriarchy, sex work is absolutely, the zenith of exploitation and dangerous labor that is unregulated and absolutely injurious to any person who participates in it. But if sex work were so liberating and empowering, why don't we have all these male prostitutes and male strippers and male OnlyFans? We don't. They know. But that's not to our advantage for us to know. And so, again, let us never forget that they are the masters of propaganda. Okay?
Yep. And also, like, taking aside just that point, like dissecting it a little bit more, of the men who are on OnlyFans, many of them don't make the same kind of money that women do. But the ones that do are almost always there because of extremely desperate circumstances. Okay? Again, like, none of those OnlyFans men are household names. We don't have a Forbes article about the highest earning guy on OnlyFans. We don't have books written about like the history and the mythology of this OnlyFans guy. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know and we don't care because, again, stop listening to what men say and start observing what men do. That's more important because what men do is telling you what they actually feel about the situation. Men will say a whole bunch of shit. I just pretend that their mouth is just moving and I just like, put on my favorite song in my brain and I'm like, just, look at him, look how pretty he is. I just ignore everything they say and I look at what they do instead. I really encourage a lot more women to just ignore men and just do what's best for you. I think that we feel guilty about this because we've been conditioned to be like, oh no, listen to everyone, give everybody a fair say. Look, you're not the Supreme Court. Okay, you're not the judge. Like, the only way that you're here to judge is to determine whether what he's saying is of any value to you. And even then, it has to be backed by action or it's just useless.
That's so well said. We are not adjudicating here, okay? We are simply determining from the data that we are given what will be most advantageous to us. And so, as far as procuring advantage, this is something that I often hear the men's rights movement decry when they talk about, women are only mating with the top 10% of men, which statistically speaking is absolutely inaccurate. That math is not mathing. But what they are referring to is what is referred to as hypergamy, right? It's a social science term. It's referring to, quoting from like Wiki, the practice of marrying or dating someone who is of a higher social status or sexual capital than oneself. And so, of course, women who are looking to see who they want to mate with and who they want to have children with are looking for, that man who can best provide for them now and in the future. And again, this is from the natural kingdom. Whenever they're decrying this, like, that's actually from the natural order of things. I don't understand how you can deny why it is most beneficial, but that's the point. They don't want what's most beneficial for us. They want what's most beneficial for them. If we start to consider their perspective, which is women are a finite resource, we are limited, we are expendable, but it still costs a lot of resources and time to recover another female. So it is to their advantage. And this is also why what Chump Lady calls cake eaters, men who want to eat their cake, let them have their cake and eat it too, referring to men who want to have wives and girlfriends, but still cheat indiscriminately. Like, it is always going to be to their advantage for us not to enforce ruthlessness. And that's why that is our number one standard, is that you absolutely have to be ruthless. And Diana, this has been very difficult for me.
Yeah, because I would say we're only as expendable as we allow ourselves to be. If you treat yourself as someone who's replaceable, you will be replaced, because at the end of the day, it comes down to, do you value yourself enough to walk away from a situation that is not serving you? And a lot of people feel a lot of guilt about doing that. But going back to what you were going to say, what was your experience like, Rose?
Well, coming from a family where women were meant to serve and we were meant to be seen and not heard. I mean, this is from the horse's mouth, or the horse's ass himself, my father, and constantly told, any rights you have, it's because we've given them to you. It's because we've decided to allow you, because, it's truly men who rule the world and who should be in charge. And your job is just simply to submit, And I was a very sweet tempered child. I'm very much an artist. I'm a people pleaser. Like, I want things to be beautiful and harmonious. And so I really tried my best to follow his edicts. And something always just kind of niggled at the back of my mind, like, is this true? Because I see how he treats my brothers and it's so different. But we're all his children, so he must love us equally. But then his actions really don't align with his words. So it was very confusing for me. It was a lot of cognitive dissonance. And of course, this fucked me over so badly. I'm dropping F-bombs left and right today. It's probably because I'm getting more comfortable with hosting with you, Diana. My favorite F word is free. After that, it's definitely the F-bomb. So please forgive me if that's not to your liking. But I'm not going to change my French because it's like the best seasoning for in the English language. So as I got older and I started to try to date, which was an absolute shit show. I mean, I was just being taken advantage of left and right, put into dangerous situations. At one point, I literally ended up in prison. And that's a story we're not going to get into today. At some point, we might have that be like a storytelling hour because that's quite the story.
You know what? Like, there's just no way how I don't even know how you can drop that and there's no follow up. I mean, but of course, I wouldn't pressure you to do that. But whenever you feel like you want to share that story with us, like, at least there you have a captive audience of me. I'll say that much.
Thank you. I love an active listener. Thank you. I mean, it's just to point out, and I don't think I'm alone in this. I mean, actually, when I was in prison, most of the women who are in prison with me were there because of men. And I know in prison people are willing, nobody's guilty. But these women weren't saying that they weren't guilty. They were saying that, they were accompanying their husband or a local townsman on a trip because he had a car and she needed to get somewhere, and they get pulled over and there are drugs in the trunk, and all of a sudden she's in prison for drugs that weren't even hers, right? But they had to have a male accompaniment to wherever they were going because men tended to have the cars and the resources, right? So in any case, that's a story for another time. But the point is, we women have been so brainwashed and conditioned. And it's not like I'm not an intelligent person. In fact, it took me a very long time to understand that I actually am quite intelligent. But in the ways of men, I was exceedingly naive and trusting, which was not a good idea. But that's how I was brought up. I don't think I'm alone in having been brought up like that. That's why I'm sharing some of these little tales, because I think this is common. I think this is sort of the law of the land across the world. And we're seeing the ill effects on so many levels. But now that we're also seeing women pushing back for seeing the rise of single women ownership, home ownership here in the United States, education, we're outpacing men, etc. That's, I think, why we are starting to see this revolt, this increasing revolt from men, because we are reaching sort of a critical mass as far as women beginning to wake up to understanding our own worth, our own inherent worth and value, not simply as reproductive machines, but as human beings with our own will and volition. And I could not be happier.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's why we have to go back to the fundamentals with people because, even as we're developing this podcast and stuff, I think a lot of people just feel a lot of guilt. I mean, a lot of women are people pleasers, and that's because they're raised to be, it's conditioning, right? I think men are allowed to explore who they are individually without any of that kind of guilt. I don't really know a lot of men who are people pleasers, to be honest with you. And I think it's because they're kind of nurtured in their desire for their ambitions, and like their ambitions are validated, right? They're told, oh, you deserve the world, you deserve this, you deserve that. But of course, maybe they have that kind of conditioning about like everything that happens for you will come with hard work. And I think we really need to understand exactly how men are conditioned in order to leverage that. Because I think a lot of women think that if I make his life easier, he'll value me more. And a lot of women are taught that your ability to be loved lies in how useful you can be to other people. And I think that's why we end up having such a disadvantaged formation of relationships in general. It doesn't just, extend to romantic relationships. It's even with like family and friends and stuff. We're very likely to overextend ourselves trying to keep everyone happy. And then if you notice a lot of these families where the woman is doing everything, she winds up being extremely bitter and very resentful, rightfully so, because she's handling everything on her own. So, we say these things not because we're trying to make the process of dating for you a lot more difficult. We say these things so that your life doesn't wind up becoming more difficult. I think I'd rather take a slightly more difficult approach to finding a partner that's actually solid than to lower my standards and keep it easy breezy and then wind up in a lifestyle that is extremely difficult to maintain. And I don't know why people don't ever play chess with their own lives, because at the end of the day, you're playing checkers in a system where men have played chess. When they're evaluating you, they're looking at whether you as a partner are able to bring that kind of value into their lives, right? They're looking at whether other men will be impressed by you, whether you look a certain way, whether you can fit into their social class, whether you're able to, deal with whatever expectations they have of you, cooking, cleaning, maintaining the house, looking after children. They have a trust that men have done their vetting. You could never convince a man to settle for a woman he doesn't find attractive. Like, there's no man going to another man being like, dude, why don't you go after someone who's like super plain? Yeah, like nobody's doing that.
The men are not doing that. We women are.
And we're always like, oh my God, why don't you give him another chance? And like, I know that he stabbed your baby, but like, it was an accident. Like, no, we need to stop. We need to stop. Okay.
You're actually making me think about this idea that, people pleasing, it does not exist among men. That is so true. I don't even think it's part of their calculus, because they're not designed to exist for anyone other than themselves. Whereas we are solely taught that that is our own purpose. Right? We're taught that that is our only purpose, is we exist to serve others. We exist to serve and please others. They're taught the inverse of that. And so I think that's why when they're like, women just don't understand, or women are like, men just won't listen to us, it's because we're operating from completely different calculations. And so this idea of people pleasing then led me to think about if a woman is described as calculating, would you consider that a positive or a negative?
I mean, it comes down to they might as well call her a hideous shrew.
Yes, right. It's the worst thing you could be considered, like a gold digger, because you're being a calculating woman. But would we ever refer to a man as being calculating? If he were like doing calculus, if he were doing science or math, but it wouldn't have that connotation that it does when women do it.
Men can say whatever the hell they want. I'd rather be a gold digger than a pussy scavenger. I'm sorry. I don't care about sticks and stones. You know what I mean? Like, let them say whatever the F they want to say. Like, they have to say whatever they can to get you to lower your standards, because there's a barrier to entry. Like, if, a B-level student was to go to Harvard and was like, well, Harvard, you've hit the wall. You're not the best of the Ivies anymore. Let me in. Harvard would just be like, okay, go home. You're drunk. No, like any institution that has high standards and high barriers of entry, do you think that they were able to maintain that exclusivity by letting any old Tom, Dick, and Harry come in? No.
And let's point out that if they do accept a B student, it's because that student has what? Particular advantages and resources. Okay?
Exactly. Or they have other talents and skills that set them apart from the other students in their cohort. There's something special about them. It's not, obviously college admissions is holistic. And I would say that, women should also be holistic in evaluating things, but there are certain non-negotiables. Like, for example, I'm sure at like a top university, it'd be like, this person should be a hardworking, driven, ambitious student, regardless of, whether they're 3.9 or 3.8. But like the same way, we need to have these like minimum standards, which a lot of women like negotiate. Like, this is where, when we come back to like put the woo and wooing and ruthless standards, these are intertwined, right? Because men are not going to woo you if they think that you have an easy access, like if they have easy access to you.
And let's not forget, these men who hate gold diggers, A, they have no gold to dig, and B, they're jealous because the men who do have gold to dig, the 10%, are getting all of the hotties that they want, right? So like, again, we're looking at what they say versus what they do. As soon as they have those resources, they're attempting to get the hottest, the most beautiful, just the most gorgeous woman that they can. They're not being like, what's her IQ? What's her EQ? How does she feel about religion? They aren't taking any of that into account, right? They want the hotties.
Yep. I mean, I don't care about some guy reading about you're a gold digger sent from my dad's iPhone in my mom's basement, writing on a Reddit forum. Also, I think women need to really develop thicker skin and not let what men say to them, take it to heart and take it too personally. Because men are not very original in how they reuse their insults, right? You're either fat, you're ugly, you're a hoe, or you're a prude. There's always some variation of these 4 insults. So just know that once he's reaching this level, he is reaching the bottom of the barrel in order to find something to attack you with. And you are already winning. You're winning through your apathy.
You're losing every time you engage with them.
Exactly.
You're winning on your own merits.
This is why we tell women not to get into these long escalations and discussions with men on the internet, where I hate those men who try to act all coy on the internet who are like, oh no, I'm really asking this in good faith, and they ask you to explain a concept that is easy for anyone to understand to them just so that they can irritate you, because to them that waste of time is still a woman giving them attention.
I think I've heard that referred to as sea lioning. It's a type of trolling or harassment. that consists of pursuing women, with relentless requests for evidence, right? It's just like, oh, I don't understand. Go look it up. There's actually a cartoon on it. It's fantastic, and it describes most of these men. But yes, you're right. FDS from the jump has always said, do not engage with the trolls.
Exactly. And we always say block and delete for this very reason. It's also a safety thing, right? Because if you're dating someone or you went on a date with a guy who's obsessive, blocking and deleting him is much better than explaining why his behavior is wrong. Two parts to that. One part of it is that you're giving him the ability to get mad and try to target you. The other fact is that by telling him what he did wrong, he's able to disguise his behavior and attack another woman with a lot more ease. So stop giving men the tools to go back and harass more women. Just make it harder. It's our job. I don't understand how people don't get the basic, simple logic that it's our job to make it difficult for them. It's their job to make shit easier for us, and it's our job to make shit difficult for them. That's why I keep saying be a problem once a month.
Yes, practice saying no on a regular basis. There's a yes there. You can always get to yes after a few no's, right? So there's no harm, no foul in that.
I mean, sometimes you have to say no just on principle. You know what I mean?
Diana, yes, Diana. I love this. And this is such a good point. Honestly, we have got to stop listening to them. And I know I read so many times about women who are like, oh man, I'm on Reddit and I see men saying this, or I was on Twitter, or, they go through all the different social medias where they just compulsively scroll and read all of these absolute trolls, the bottom dregs of society. And this is a form of self-harm, and it's a form of self-sabotage. And it is absolutely why we will decry it at every turn. I mean, these are people who are not worthy of your time, your eyeballs, a scintilla of your energy. It's better served looking for sisterhood, community, self-betterment. Hell, even go take a nap. And literally anything but reading them and letting those words into your heart, because we tend to really take them to heart because we've been taught that what men say matters and that men's word is the law of the land. And it is, in fact, the inverse of what the natural order would have it be. Our word needs to be the law of the land. What we say is what goes.
Yep. And especially when it comes to our relationships, because I remember early on in the forum days, people had a lot of issues with the walk dates and the coffee dates and the drink dates and stuff. And they were like, well, I don't want to commit to a dinner. It's if I don't like him, it's easier to just go on a coffee date and walk away from him or whatever, And the coffee date is what I do when I'm trying to get to know a mentor in business. To me, it's not a very romantic proposition. So, if I'm meeting a guy for a coffee date, even if it is if it was a date, I would assume it's a mentorship opportunity, because the only reason I would agree to that is because I'm trying to get something out of him, straight talk.
Yeah, professional, exactly.
I mean, even if he thinks it's a date, I'm you know what? I'm trying to see if you're a professional resource to me or not. So the most leverage and power you have with a man is before you get into any sort of relationship or sleep with them or anything. You know what I mean? That's the most leverage you're ever going to have, is what can this person ultimately do for me? That being said, I would never, ever go on a coffee date with a person, because outside of the fact that it's lazy and shows a lack of imagination, it's the fact that, a lot of people use this excuse of well, it's a short way for me to test compatibility. There are cheaper and more effective ways for you to do that without leaving your home and without putting on makeup and getting ready and doing all that other stuff, Just call him on FaceTime and have a 10-minute conversation with him. The number of men I've vetoed and nexted just because of their inability to hold a 10-minute phone call. And I mean, this is very relevant for me also because I travel a lot for work, So there's no guarantee that I'm always going to be in the same place with a person that I'm dating or a partner that I have. So if I can't even have a 10-minute conversation with you because I just find you that numbingly boring, why would I go on an actual physical date with you? You can't even keep my attention over pixels.
And this is, the FDS has always said that. They're this is, one, we don't believe in coffee dates or walk dates or any of that. Two, even if you do go on dinner, you can walk away at any point, women. And this is part of us learning to let go of that guilt. If you're feeling a certain type of way and he's creating these feelings in you, just literally get up and walk away. But also, one of the tenets was, before you agree to a date, you have to at least have a phone call or a FaceTime call, because you're doing everything you can to conserve your own resources, time, energy, etc., while also maximizing the potential for you to find the one person you're really looking for. You have to separate the wheat from the chaff. If we approach this more from a numbers game, the more men that you're talking to that you can go through on FaceTime and see yes, no, and then maybe yes, no, it has to be either a fuck yes or a hell no. And then if you go to dinner and you decide from the jump, there's something, you don't like how he smells, or he's got a weird eye contact thing, excuse yourself to go to the bathroom, leave through the back fucking door. And, if you're worried about the money or whatever, always bring cash on you. I mean, I say this to everybody anyway, like always have cash on you. But by having already met this man, you have bathed, you have showered, you have groomed, you have probably applied makeup and perfume. You've spent money on transit to get there. It's time. Time is precious. You can never get that time back. You can never create more of it. You've already invested so much just in giving this one man a chance to take you out to dinner. So, I mean, we really have to think about this from a perspective of your time is so brief on this earth. Why are you so willing to just give it away indiscriminately?
Yep. And also, like I said, like once you set the precedent for them to take you on these walk dates or these coffee dates or these drink dates or whatever, you have now put the bar so low that anything above that will seem like a lot, because it doesn't encourage them to woo you. What you've told him is that the bar for access to you is very low and he has to put very little effort to keep you on the hook. And again, don't assume that just because he's doing this walk date with you or whatever, that he's like loyal. He's like, we have walked the walk of life together. And so I shall, it's just not promenading. This is not the Victorian era. You're not in Bridgerton. Like,
this is such a good point. Actually, you just reminded me about this. Like, there was a stitch on a YouTube video I was watching yesterday, and this woman was talking about her now ex-husband. And she was saying, how you start is how they need to go on. And so she was talking about how in like their early courtship, he had gifted her this ring, this super cheap, easily burnished ring that she didn't even like. But she said she didn't want to be ungrateful, right? She didn't want to be rude. And so she was very warm and praised him and thanked him profusely. And she said, I could not have made a worse decision because throughout our entire relationship, he would only ever buy me things that were thrifted, secondhand. And she said, and I like thrifting. It's one of my hobbies. But when he always would buy himself the brand new top of the line, and I would only ever be gifted when he could scavenge, that just goes to show his entire mentality towards that relationship and towards her. Again, like talking about the gold diggers, these men are not begrudging these women, dining experiences at Michelin-starred restaurants. They are not denying them the trips on yachts and flying out to Monte Carlo. They are happy. They're excited because they know that is part of them proving their own aptitude in the natural order of mate selection.
Also, I mean, I would say that for a truly honorable person, there is some value in and of itself to be able to provide that kind of high standard of living and experiences for the person that they're spending time with. They derive joy and pleasure. And again, it reaffirms their own masculinity to be able to say that I'm able to do this for another woman. Like, I remember seeing this little, like those guys who are like on TikTok or Reels or whatever, who like go up to random men and like basically try to get them to shit talk their own wives and stuff.
Yeah, they say, how much did you spend on the engagement ring?
You do remember who, like, there was like one where they asked like this woman, they asked this guy, like, how much do you spend?
They were Indian. It was an Indian couple, like an Indian-American couple.
No. This one was not an Indian-American couple. This one was, I think she was Latina, and I think he was also Latina. I don't know. I don't know if he was a Latino or not, but I remember she was Latina. And she had a beautiful ring, and, like, this guy asked him, like, oh, how much do you spend and stuff? And, like, he's, like, very honestly said what he spent. And he was like, oh, like, what is she doing? Like, what are you doing? And, like, what are you bringing to the table? And, like, he didn't even let her answer. He was like, she brings a lot of things to my life that are of value. And, like, it's because she brings that much value to me that to me, giving her this is nothing. This is like what she deserves and more, and he's like, if those men want to, like, I think every man should do what he can, like, based on obviously his income. Like, if you're a $30,000 earning guy, don't like spend a $30,000 ring, right? Obviously common sense, because you can't afford that. But like, everybody should be within their limit. But if it's your prerogative to like give the least that you can, that sounds like a you problem. That's like a mental illness or something. Like,
you're right.
I could do it, so I did. And I was like laughing so hard because he was just not letting him like belittle her and ridicule, and he wasn't putting her in the position of having to justify and defend her relationship. And he straight up cut in, and he was just like, nah, what you're not gonna do is play with my wife, okay? What you're not gonna do is like insult her and say that she doesn't bring value to my life. She obviously does.
Next to him, she was standing next to him, just like smiling serenely, just like she didn't have to do anything. She just had to exist. And this man was like, this is my lady. You have no clue.
She had that like nice look of pride where she was like, yep, that's right. That's my man. And I was like, you know what? This is one of the few situations where I'm like, good for you, girl. Good for you.
Yes,
Like,
yes. I was so happy to see that. And I was like, Rose, Rose, you need to start finding. So ladies, if you do want to watch all these like examples or you want to be engaging, Instead of doom scrolling, be actively seeking out these examples of what is right and what is good and just for you. I mean, I don't know about you, Diana, but like I enlivened by gifting. I live to gift. I love to gift. Like year round, I'm planning and I'm plotting and I'm scheming and I'm searching because I want just the right gift for just the right person. You know, if I love you, like there are no ends to the earth to which I'll go to just bring a smile to your face, you know, to just warm your heart. That warms my heart. Why wouldn't we want that for ourselves?
I mean, I have an ongoing competition with my friend about who's the better gift giver. And like, since she's not here, since she isn't here to defend herself, I'm obviously the better one because she can't, speak for herself here. So I'm taking advantage of the situation to say that I am a much better gift giver than she is. She can at me later, but you know what I mean?
You got the mic now, Diana.
Yeah, exactly. What can she do? But, I pay attention to people and, I pay attention to them because this is for me, like something I really find fun, like finding the thing that I know will make them happy. And like, I look at their hobbies and their interests and like, I'll try to find something that's very special to them. And even when I travel and stuff, even in like small ways, I'll always buy postcards and souvenirs and things like that, trinkets and stuff like back from my trips or my friends and stuff. I was raised with a father who was like, never walk over someone's threshold without having a gift in your hand. So like those are just basic manners, so like when I get a dinner invitation or something, like I always bring like flowers or wine or cheese or something, like it's just weird not to bring anything.
Literally anything.
Yeah, even now, like I completely disregard the rule for people who say don't bring me anything for my birthday. Like I'll bring it to them either before or after so that I kind of violate the rule because I'm like, well, you said don't bring anything on your birthday. So before or after, like, you didn't say shit about that. So like I'm very specific about, like I care about this stuff. And so, for me, gift giving is just a massively underappreciated form of displaying love. And I think a lot of people have just equated it to materialism. But when done right, I think it can be truly the sweetest and most wholesome thing that you can do for somebody else.
Make gift giving great again, okay?
Exactly. At its very essence, it's the acknowledgement of like you observing something. At the very essence of it, it's the acknowledgement of somebody else, right? Like you have observed them and you have given them something that is so personal to them and you're acknowledging your relationship with them. And I feel like a lot of men don't like, or they do see it, but like they only see it the one way in which it's like the girl is buying him like a PS4 or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why, like, I mean, even with some of the men that I've met, like the kinds of gifts that they give their wife is so impersonal. It's like, oh, they read it from like some book in the 80s or something where it's like, buy her chocolate and flowers and a teddy bear and she'll be happy. And like, if you brought me that shit, I'd be like, it's not very personal. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that I will turn it down, but this is something that you should be doing weekly. And like, where's my birthday gift and like my other shit? You know what I mean? Like, I'm annoyed when people forget this kind of stuff. Absolutely.
I never feel more appreciated and seen than when somebody gets me a gift that is truly geared towards me. And actually, there's a French anthropologist from the mid 20th century, Marcel Mauss. He wrote an entire treatise on this called The Gift. And it's actually a pretty easy read, especially for an anthropologist having written it. But he talks about, indigenous communities and how basically it is a system of debts and obligations, but not debts in the negative sense. Debts in the sense that I am indebted to you for your kindness and your generosity, your thoughtfulness. And this means that there has to be a continuation of this relationship. This ensures an ongoing relationship because I now have to reciprocate. It's almost like a banking note. Like, I'm giving this to you now because I want to make sure you continue to be in my life because I value you and I treasure you. And so here's a material manifestation of that wish and that hope and of good faith. This is how entire societies have run for millennia. Well, I understand why gifting got a bad rap because whenever women want to get gifts, somehow like, well, how can you expect him to remember your birthday? It only comes once a year on the same date. Same with anniversaries. Like, and it's because women who expect gifts have been taught that we're somehow craven or crass, when actually it is just simply common sense. If you love someone, you want to show them that you are grateful for them, that you take joy in their presence in your life, and you want to demonstrate that. How can you not?
And it's this idea of like, oh, you're a greedy, materialistic goblin. You're an ungrateful, greedy goblin who just wants more. And it's like, fundamentally, like anything that men say, just understand it's all projection, okay? Because there aren't greedier goblins. Like, you will give your whole life and soul to a man and he will still demand more. He will like, why not all of your souls? All of your 9 lives? Give all that shit to me. You know what I mean? Like, again, I don't feel any guilt for making my expectations clear. And if you're not able to meet them, that's fine. I will find someone who will. But like, I'm not going to be, bullied by a man who has zero standards for love in his family. Because at the end of the day, like, these are the same men who expect you to keep track of his mom's birthday and his like family's outings and like their festivals, or you know what I mean? Like he's the one who expects you to like kind of unify the bonds between yourself and his family, and like to make sure that he's still an active member. Yep, I know a lot of women who are like, they're buying the gifts for like the nephews and the nieces, but they are writing letters on all of those, they're writing little post notes on those little things saying, oh, it's love from Uncle Jack and Uncle Jenny. And it's like, Uncle Jack doesn't even know that there's a gift coming out to you. You know what I mean? Uncle Jack is just a jackass. Like, he's not doing shit.
Do not give credit where it is not due. And so also, again, flip that around. Do give credit where it is due. Where is credit due? Probably you. Okay? If anything, it's long overdue. It's an overdue debt that you are owed. And this is something, like Diana was saying, it's not simply among romantic relationships. In fact, amongst my own family, I have great acclaim and fame as a great gift gifter. And do you know what that's gotten me in return? Abso-fucking-lutely nothing. Nothing. They all love getting the gifts from me. They all love getting, the ships packaged and things like that, or packages shipped to them from me, filled with all sorts of delightful goodies. But like, I'm lucky if I even get a text of thank you. At this point, I've actually, because of FDS, thank you, FDS, I've actually started to pull back and reassess who is actually worthy of being gifted all these things. And more, I'm deciding it's me. I am. Me, myself, and I. I've really taken to starting to just like, do I really want to buy this? I'll never forget my mom when I used to travel. And I, like you, Diana, whenever I travel, I come back with postcards and trinkets and tchotchkes and, everything. I still have gifts from my early 20s. I had gifted her when I first started to travel. Then when she passed, they reverted to me. But I remember I'd come home and I would have a whole suitcase filled with gifts. And I'd be like, and this, I wanted to show her because they were so neat. And this is for so-and-so, and this is for so-and-so, and la, 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 la. And she'd say, oh, well, what's for you? And I would say, oh, well, I don't know. She's like, well, never forget to keep a couple of things for yourself. And honestly, that was a real mind shift for me. I had never actually thought about that. She's like, you're going to cherish these more than anyone else ever could because they come with the memories and the time that you spent picking them out, talking to the vendor. Never forget to gift yourself first, is what she said.
And part of it is, when we're talking about cultivating ruthless standards, I think a lot of women feel uncomfortable also having that hard boundary because they're not used to receiving those things for themselves. So like if you came from a position where you always did walk dates and coffee dates and you'd never received gifts from your partner or you never received flowers and things like that, it can feel almost unnatural to expect that or even demand it from someone, And I think a way to kind of get over that is to actually, weirdly enough, start sending flowers and shit to yourself.
I was just going to say, start wooing yourself. Start wooing yourself.
Yeah, we got to put the woo back in wooing for ourselves. I'm always like an advocate of the little treat. I'm like, I deserve a little treat. It's a girl treat. Like I work so hard, little treat. And my whole life is a series of little treats. And like, I remember one time I was asked out by this was like back in my pick-me phase. But I was asked out by this Uber Eats driver or something. And like, I was in a phase of like, oh, the apps are not working for me. Let me just like go out spontaneously and stuff. And he was like good looking. So with so many red flags. Oh my God, one after another. Like he lied about his age. He had like 2 kids, like all sorts of, he just acted crazy the whole time through. And I mean, thankfully I only ever went out on like the one date with him, but like that one date was enough to like, it was like a sobering reality into why I need to have more standards than just like say yes to, whoever's out on the street. But I remember he brought me like flowers and stuff. And he's like, you probably never get flowers like this. And that was when I realized, I was like, oh yeah, this guy actually thinks really low of me because again, he's just a guy who asked a random woman out on the street. And he thinks my standards and my boundaries are so low that like, I'm not used to getting any kind of good treatment from men. So like that's the only circumstance in which I would settle for like no one. Right. And because I don't know my worth, he can say this like weirdly neggy shit of like, oh, you probably never had someone who bring you flowers. No, nobody's ever done this for you and stuff. And I was like, which is untrue because people had and like people have, But he happened to catch me on a day when he came to like pick me up or whatever, like he happened to catch me on the day when like I had bought. So I used to buy flowers to like, I used to go visit this grave of like this old Hollywood actress that I really liked who passed away obviously decades ago. like this was like during COVID. So I used to go and check her grave and make sure that there weren't any dead flowers. Then I'd pick out the dead
That's so
flowers and like
beautiful,
just,
Diana.
yeah, yeah. I mean, more than anything, just because like I had just lost my like grandmother at the time. So like because I was like, you know, countries away from her, there was no like proper way for me to grieve her. So like this was kind of like a way to do that because my grandmother happened to be a huge fan of this particular actress. So it was kind of like, you know, by honoring her, I felt like I was honoring my grandmother. So I actually became really good friends with the gardeners at the cemetery where I used to go and like do the little cleanup. And they used to give me flowers like all the time to like take back because they would like, you know, get these flowers. They'd be like, oh, here, like we have so many here, you can take some. So that day that he came back to visit me, there was like a huge bouquet of flowers sitting in my house. And so when he came in being like, oh, you probably never see those flowers. And his like piddly little rose, like little thing was
like 2 flowers.
Yeah, I'll just set this right next to my ginormous bouquet.
What a great illustration. What a great illustration, though.
He didn't know what to say, but I was laughing the whole way through because I knew in his brain he probably thought I got it from some guy. But it was just because I was doing this like little cleanup work and I befriended the gardeners that they were like, oh, this is, you know, sweet woman comes by, and they just gave it to me. But again, like, you know, even if you just mail those out to yourself, like, honestly, I'm telling you, it works like a charm because it does actually cheer you up to see that kind of beauty in your house on a regular basis. But besides that, like, you have to start getting used to treating yourself well so that when somebody else comes along and treats you well, it's not so foreign. It doesn't feel, I think a lot of women self-sabotage as well. Because I think when they experience something that's good, like their immediate things to shut down or try to find flaws in it. And like, you know, when you're not used to good treatment, you try to find excuses for like why this is a sham. And sometimes it is, right? You have to keep an eye out for like when it's a sham and when like your, you know, body's reacting gift of fear style. But sometimes I think a lot of women react to like, I'm so used to being treated poorly. And like, that's why they end up going back to relationships where they're continuously being treated poorly because that level of dysfunction and that dysregulation of the nervous system feels normal in a way that, you know, when you're treated well, there's like a level of calm and peace and just general contentment that is so abnormal and confusing to a person who's just used to dysfunction that it's very easy to like be suspicious of it just because you're not used to it. So it's very important that you cultivate that kind of room for yourself to do that for yourself every day, where you're looking after yourself and treating yourself like, you know, in the highest version of yourself, like you're doing for you what other people can't. So that when good people come along and they treat you the same way you treat yourself, it's not so weird. It's not strange.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right that, you know, what you were brought up with is what feels normal. I'll never forget my therapist getting frustrated with me. Now, if you know therapy, I've had a fantastic therapist for many years now. I've been so fortunate. And she's an older lady who, you know, is a Southern genteel lady who is absolutely ruthless, who's had a wonderful life. And she's been a fantastic therapist. But you know, if a therapist gets frustrated with you, it's because you're really frustrating them. And all this is to say, she would get so frustrated with me because I would keep going back to my home. She called me Cinderella. She's like, oh, are you going to go do your Cinderella work? Yes, absolutely. I was scrubbing floors. I was buying gifts. I was chauffeuring. I was cooking. I was exhausting myself. I was losing out on money and financial opportunities and professional advancement because, you know, I had to go back and perform my designated function within the family unit, within the dysfunctional family that I'm from. And I'll never forget her joy when I finally started to say, like, I don't think I'm going to go home anymore, or I'm going to go home, but only for 2 nights. And that means they're not going to be able to, like, you know, corral me into doing all these major projects that need to be done. Oh, the garage needs to be reorganized, or like, we've got to go up to the attic and get all this done. And so I would make my trips much shorter, or I wouldn't go at all. And she was so proud of me when I finally started to turn that corner. And again, it's been a long process of re-educating myself, of like deschooling so that I can reschool myself, because, you know, my absolute inclination is to be miserable and unhappy because that's how I was brought up. That was my function as the youngest girl daughter, as the youngest girl child. I was there to serve. And it has been a very, very long process for me to start to let go of that and to embrace the fact that, like, yes, I am here to serve my own damn self. And it's ongoing, right? It's ongoing. But when I tell you, one thing that my therapist has always said is, she's like, Rose, look at how people treat you here in the life that you've, she's like, people gift you things, manna from heaven. She's like, I've never seen manna fall from heaven like it does for you. Never in my entire life. And she's like, doesn't this show you the kind of person you are? The only people who treat you poorly are your own family members. So you have to start disbelieving what they would have you believe. And I think that is exactly what we as women need to start understanding. We need to start disbelieving what men would have us believe. And we need to start believing again in ourselves as whole individuals in and of ourselves. And also the fact that we can woo our own damn self. If they want to come along and outdo us, they're welcome to.
Yeah, and I think you really have to believe in your own divine purpose, Like I believe my divine purpose is that I was put on this planet to humble men. And so I think I do a really, really good job. Like anytime I'm difficult with them and like I'm a straight up villain in their lives, I'm like, I am following God's path. Like God has sent me here to humble them. And it's like, and I'm doing it so well,
I'm so proud of you.
I'm so proud of myself. I'm so proud of me. Like I just do it so well.
Didn't Ashi say this last week? What were her final thoughts when we asked her? She was like, start understanding that you are the prize. You are the reason for life on Earth.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at the wild, you will see that like the women there, like they are humble, They are a humbling force. Like the female species is
a humbling.
Yeah. Have you heard of, there's like an old poem by Rudyard Kipling where he talks about the female of the species. Seeing as we're wrapping up, do you want me to share that little poem with you?
I would love that. Please.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Rudyard Kipling, but this is one of the few poems where I'm like, you know what? Okay, we forgive him for this. Right?
Yes, please.
So this is the poem. He says, when the Himalayan peasant meets the he-bear in his pride, he shouts to scare the monster who will often turn aside. But the she-bear thus accosted rents the peasant tooth and nail, for the female of the species is more deadly than the male. When Nag, the basking cobra, hears the careless foot of man, he will sometimes wriggle sideways and avoid it if he can. But his mate makes no such motion when she camps beside the trail, for the female of the species is more deadly than the male. When the early Jesuit fathers preached to Hurons and Choctaws, they prayed to be delivered from the vengeance of the squaws. 'Twas the woman, not the warriors, turned those stark enthusiasts pale, for the female of the species is more deadly than the male. Man's timid heart is bursting with the things he must not say, for the woman that God gave him isn't his to give away. But when hunter meets with husbands, each confirms the other's tale. The female of the species is more deadly than the male. Man, a bear in most relations, worm and savage otherwise. Man propounds negotiations, man accepts the compromise. Very rarely will he squarely push the logic of a fact to its ultimate conclusion in unmitigated act. Fear or foolishness impels him, ere he lay the wicked low, to concede some form of trial even to his fiercest foe. Mirth obscene diverts his anger, doubt and pity oft perplex him in dealing with an issue to the scandal of the sex. The woman that God gave him, every fiber of her frame, proves her launched for one sole issue, armed and engined for the same. And to serve that single issue, lest the generations fail, the female of the species must be deadlier than the male. She who faces death by torture for each life beneath her breast, may not deal in doubt or pity, must not swerve for fact or jest. These be purely male diversions, not in these her honor dwells. She, the other law we live by, is that law and nothing else. She can bring no more to living than the powers that make her great, as the mother of the infant and the mistress of the mate. But when babe and man are lacking and she strides unchanged to claim, her right as femme and barren, her equipment is the same. So it came that man the coward, when he gathers to confer, I've cut down some of it because there's a lot, with his fellow braves in council, dare not leave a place for her. War with life and conscience, he uplifts his erring hands to some god of abstract justice which no woman understands. And man knows it, knows moreover that the woman that God gave him must command but may not govern, shall enthrall but not enslave him. And she knows because she warns him and her instincts never fail, that the female of her species is more deadly than the male. And this is written by man in 1911, okay? So men know.
Yeah, men know. And to that we say, scrotes,
die mad.
Die mad.